Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. And before I introduce today's marvelous guest, I am just going to remind you, I mentioned it in last week's recording, but I think it's worth mentioning again that the wonderful algorithms at YouTube decided that this channel must be a fraud and scamming a couple of weeks ago. Which is very odd, as those of you who are regular viewers will have noticed that I make no money from this channel. It is not monetized. So I, thankfully, as you can see, it was reinstated, having been pulled for about an hour. And consequently, I have taken the precaution of putting all of the material on Rumble as well. So Lightways is now on two platforms, this one and on Rumble also. So I would urge you, those of you who have subscribed to this channel, and I am so grateful to you for having done so, please do follow me on Rumble. I'm also putting a link to that channel in the description box, so that you have a way of finding me should I mysteriously disappear. So now, without any further ado, I would like to welcome Rebekah Hirsch, who has written this fabulous book called Charting the Soul. Here it is. And you will see that it is a hefty tome, but that is why it is so brilliant, because it is so full. Welcome, Rebekah.
Hello, and thank you. Thanks for having me.
The title is called, it's Charting the Soul, Astrology, Characterology, and the Human Energy Field. So it is a very packed title, and I think it might be good to unpack that at some point. But first of all, what was the inspiration for this beautiful book?
Okay. So, I've told this story before, but it's actually 40 years since I first trained as an astrologer. I was not brought up in a spiritual family. I was not brought up with any religion. Astrology just came and found me. And I started studying, and I was lucky enough to do my beginner's course with Howard Sass-Portas, who's, then went on to write a very famous book. And then as I got more and more into astrology, and then I got into spirituality as well, I felt that I was having experiences that I could only describe as encounters with divine energy. And so I then went to train as an energy healer at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing in America. And came out from the Barbara Brennan School, fabulous time training at the Center for Psychological Astrology, fabulous time training at the Barbara Brennan School, set up practice in the sort of beginning of this century as a healer and an astrologer. And then once I started doing healing, so this is hands-on healing, using higher sense perception to look into a person's aura. I just remember there was one day when I was looking at a client and working with the aura, and I saw this red line running up her energy field, and I just thought, that's Mars, that's Aries, and that stayed with me. And then I went back to the Brennan School and did the advanced course and had to write a thesis, and I started doing research for the book while I was in America, with just looking at the charts of my fellow students and, working it all out. And in the end, it's like, I'm a painter, I'm not a writer, but, this little hand was in the small of my back pushing me, saying, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. I went into Watkins' bookshop, and I said, in London, I said, can I see your psycho-spiritual astrology books? And we sort of wandered over to the astrology shelves, and the guy said, this is way back in 2002, he said, actually, there aren't any. And I just thought, okay, then this is something that I have to try and put together. And it took me years. And as you say, it's big. It covers such a vast range of, subjects, from the psychology and the Jungian sort of looking at, what happened in childhood, it's actually Wilhelm Reich, who was a contemporary of Jung, who really looked at the 5 stages of characterology and the energy field, and the fact, for me, the fact that we are divine, eternal spirits manifest on, into this physical realm. And then how that all works together with the astrology, and they're not separate for me. And so it's a big book.
It's a big, exciting book because your interests are very much my interests. I am also very interested in healing and looking at the auric field and understanding the links between the planets and the chakras for healing, etc. So I think maybe we need to examine that term characterology, because there are many people who may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly valuable characterology. So Wilhelm Reich was a student of Freud's, contemporary of Freud and Jung, split away, and he's the founder of the branch of psychology that's talking about the body. And he's saying that when we have traumatic experiences, if we're not able to release it in a healthy way, it gets locked up in the body. And, that's very much where contemporary psychology is at. It's in the body, and it doesn't, in a way, not to depress people, in a way the talk therapy isn't going to do it. You've got to find the feelings, you've got to get into the body, you've got to get into the energy field. So, of course, at the beginning of the 20th century, everybody was talking about child development. There are a lot of, great names talking about the importance of child development. And he's talking about what happens when trauma is experienced in a very young child. And we've got these 5 stages of childhood, very, very early days. So gestation in the womb, first days of life, that he calls the schizoid stage. Second one is when in arms, the baby that's in the nurturing phase. He talks about that as the oral stage. Then you've got a little toddler who's learning to walk and talk and feed themselves and trying to develop a sense of identity. That's the masochist stage. Then you've got an older child who's really starting to get an idea of gender. There's a lot more going on. And that's the psychopathic stage. And finally, you've got a child, who's probably at school and is learning, to a certain extent, learning how to enter society, how to become part, what are the rules of belonging to this family, to this culture. And the key thing that Reich said was that if you, this young baby, whatever, experiences trauma in the early days of life, that is going to have a different impact on the development of the personality than if they did experience trauma at a later stage. And so that's why he's talking about defense mechanisms that we put in place. Reich talked about armoring in the body, where we defend against the pain of the memory of a trauma, or the pain of separation from, beloved parent, or the wrong kind of, message coming from the parents. These traumas, you're too little to know how to deal with them. You haven't got, pre-verbal in some cases, and it forms a defense. It forms a blockage, which will manifest in the body. You'll see it in the body. But it's also, this is the Barbara Brennan healing approach, it's going to appear in the human energy field. There's going to be a shadow over the heart, a shadow, down in the guts kind of thing, like where some message has gone in, and some kind of the little being has made an interpretation that they need to protect themselves. And these are the defenses. A lot of 20th century psychology is focusing on defense mechanisms. And I just want to say one thing, which is that with the healing, with the Barbara Brennan work, you go, yes, yes, there is trauma. Yes, there is defense. And there's a mighty soul that is coming through this life. There is a core star that is bringing through the life force, and there is a gift. It's not just about the defense. It's not just about the wound. Sometimes we feel like the walking wounded, but we are these mighty souls, and each of the defenses comes with a gift. And that's the focus of my book, is like, yes, yeah, we're wounded, and what's the gift? What's the light that's wanting to come through here?
There's so much in what you've just said, and as an analytical hypnotherapist, it's a fact, you know.
Yeah.
It, and the need to ground the feeling in the body, to find out. Clients are extremely eloquent when I ask them to locate a feeling in their bodies. They know exactly where they feel it. Primarily the most common one is in around the chest, or the area of the solar plexus, the stomach, and sometimes it's the throat. And I think I'm giving this in the order of frequency with which I hear the answers. The head comes after the throat, in my experience, and sometimes it's in the limbs. But it's very clear that people are feeling it in the body, and it's a fascinating thing to work with that and to go from there, and then to think about the energy field too, because it's so important. And the fact, the defense mechanisms, the block, it's the defense mechanisms which have become outdated, are no longer serving, and they're actually standing in the way of, as you said, the light shining through. And we talk about trauma, and it doesn't need to be big trauma. It can be something very slight that a parent said, or a teacher said, or anybody, that the child interprets in a particular way. I'm just thinking back to when I was training as a hypnotherapist, and we studied a case where a woman had been in a series of abusive relationships and had become an alcoholic. And when they tracked back to what it was that, the moment in which something went awry, it was a throwaway comment by her mother.
Oh.
It was just a throwaway comment. She had been discovering masturbation, and her mother just looked at her and said, "Good girls don't do that."
Yeah.
And so the defense that evolved was putting on weight so that she was less attractive, as she thought, to men. And then the men she chose were abusive. She needed that balance of punishment, because good girls don't do that.
It's a shame, isn't it?
It was the shame of it. And so it was, I could just imagine if her mother had realized the harm that comment had made to her, she would have been absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
But there it was.
Yeah.
And so we untangle, the therapist untangled that as we untangle these moments. But I thought it was important to point out that sometimes it can just be a throwaway comment.
Yes.
The child takes it to heart and interprets it in a very deep way. And it takes root. And so the defense is there. So this is quite a powerful link that you're making. Tell us now where the astrology comes and how it links to the energy field.
So that was so exciting because the students at the Barbara Brenner School, you have 4 years, and we're studying characterology all the time. The course is divided into 5. So week 1, you're studying the schizoid defense. Week 2, you're studying the oral. So we know the defenses really, really well. And when I went to do the advanced level training, and I was thinking, like, what's the astrology? All my fellow students lined up and gave me their birth data. And I'm doing the research. I'm looking and think, okay, schizoid, fragmentation, very, very mental, oral, codependent, needy, and so on. And I was going through their charts with them. And I remember doing the chart of a lovely woman she was a brilliant healer, very powerful, but with her dominant schizoid characterology, which is where you leave the body and go mental. Kind of, you go into the mind because the body is not safe. And we are looking at her chart, and I know I've already decided that I'm looking for Uranus, fragmentation. Let's just stay in the mind. Let's not come into the body. But she's not, and then suddenly I see it, Gemini. Mercury, so, the Uranus higher octave of Mercury, fragmentation, splitting. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Let's not feel it. Let's not go into the body. And that was such a breakthrough, and looking at, and then testing it with other charts. Yep. And then, of course, it was kind of obvious, but I got the evidence from my very small study. I'm talking about 30 people, but I worked out the theories then, and it won't surprise you as an astrologer. Oral stage, the moon, but also Neptune, where you lose that sense of boundaries, and you're merging with mother or with your primary caretaker, and somehow that doesn't go quite right, and you never quite get that sense of boundaries, and that leads to codependency in later life. And one of the most interesting stages, I think, is the masochist stage. And that's that ghastly feeling of shame when that mother that you're talking about, she's trying to protect her little girl. Don't do that. But the consequence, the impact, it goes into the 3rd chakra, knocks out your self-worth. And then, I think shame is the worst feeling. I'd rather feel fear. I'd rather feel anger. It's a ghastly feeling, and there it is, stuck in the 3rd chakra. And this is the masochist wound, because the little being, 2 or 3, and they think, oh, this is interesting, and, and I want to do this, and I want to eat that. And the parents are constantly saying, no, we don't do that. And there's potty training, and there's eat properly and all that. And they're constantly being put into some kind of framework which may not go with their spontaneous upwelling of the life force. And then that idea that when I am just myself, I'm not welcome. And when I do what they want, the pleaser, then if I do what they want, then I'm safe. And that awful shame. It's like there's something wrong with me. There's something deeply wrong with me. They don't like me when I'm spontaneous. I'm going to conform to what they want. That's the masochist. And that, for me, it's the sun, because it's the child in the 5th house. There's some wanting to shine, wanting to play. And when they get knocked down, and it's Pluto. It's Pluto that says, oh, I'm going to hide away. I'm going down into the underworld with my authentic self. And I'm going to be, watching all the time for what they want. But it's Pluto and Scorpio where they pull it all down under the surface, because it's not safe to reveal myself. And then you've got the psychopaths quickly. That's the fiery planets. That's the positive expression of the sun. Look at me, Mars and Jupiter. And I thought the other thing that I found very interesting was when we come to the rigid, this is where we are going out into the world. We're learning, how to get on with other kids at school, how to deal with, all that, and what happens in the family. Obviously, that formation of the superego is Saturn. We all know that. But I started to see it's also Venus, because it's focused on the relationship, on do they like me, other people, am I meeting all the targets.
Do you know, I completely agree about Venus
No.
because it's that comparing to others.
Absolutely.
You know, I just
Yeah.
said to a client this morning, could you please stop comparing yourself to everybody else? Because
Yes.
that's a waste of time and you're just getting more miserable.
Yeah.
And I mean, I that is summing up what I was saying, but yeah, that's what it comes down to. And that is such a Venus thing, that comparison. And I see
Yeah.
it amongst girls a lot.
Yes.
The boys, it's a kind of different competitive, it's more of a Mars thing
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that trying to outdo each other. Uh,
Yes. It is. It's pure Mars. Yes.
but with the girls, it really is that comparison.
Mm.
Uh, and it is so damaging. So maybe you need to clarify here what is meant by psychopath in this context, because
Oh, yes.
there are so many connotations
Yeah.
now that have
Yes.
nothing to do with what you've just said.
Not at all. In fact, I mean, I think all those five names, they all have terrible connotations, schizoid and oral and masochist and psychopathic and rigid. They kind of describe what Reich wanted to describe. But I think that they're full of judgment, especially the psychopath. The psychopathic stage is a child, probably 4, 5, where they're getting a sense of gender, and they fall in love with the parent of the opposite sex. They realize there's two of them, one like that one, I'm like that one, I'm not like that one. And then they get, and again, it's a Venus Mars thing. They get into a bit of rivalry. A little boy will get into rivalry with dad, and it's a very heroic stage. Like, I'm going to prove to my beloved parent how wonderful I am. So that's the sun and the Leo, the golden child, and the little Mars hero, winning things, and Jupiter being, funny and delightful. That's the good side. And the negative side of the psychopathic stage is very, very sad, because it's well, it's the little bit of Freud and the Oedipus complex. It's like, if you give your love to the parent of the opposite sex, and they in any way turn around and subtly say, yeah, you're the one, actually, I know I'm supposed to be with mummy, but you're the one, or I'm supposed to be with daddy, but you're so special. Well, it can go into a distortion. And then the child will grow in a perpetual cycle of betrayal, where they'll fall in love and they'll do the heroic thing, and it will end up in betrayal, because it can't ever work out, because you can't ever I think of the story of Sir Lancelot and King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. And Lancelot was this wonderful hero, this shining knight, and he ruined his whole career because he couldn't let go of his obsession with Guinevere. And that's like the somewhere the Oedipus complex, the child that's locked in to the battle to win the love of the parent of the opposite sex. I do want to say that all of these woundings have, and I renamed them in my book, because we're not, and Barbara Brennan said this a lot, you're not your defense, you're not your wound, you're this magnificent light. And so I talked about the 5 stages of child development, 5 stages of coming into manifestation from essence spirit into a manifest body, as if it was like the growth of a plant, like the germination stage, which goes with the schizoid stage, when you're very, very new and you're just a little seed that's multiplying, and the budding phase and the flowering phase and the harvest phase, the rooting phase. So I renamed all the 5 stages to give them that sense that it's not a mistake. yes, you might have gone a bit overboard with Neptune and you might have got issues of codependency. Let's pull that back, but let's not throw Neptune out because we love Neptune. You know, Neptune gives us music and poetry and art and dance and access to the divine. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think that's so important. One of the things that I resist extremely strongly is labeling.
Yeah.
Um, because two reasons. Labeling traps people.
Yeah.
Also, there is an element of judgment with a label.
Absolutely.
And lastly, there is an element of condemnation.
Mm.
I have this thing, I am this thing, and therefore this is the way I am forever. And for some people, that becomes like a crutch. That means that they don't actually have to challenge themselves. And for others, it's a dungeon from which they cannot climb.
Absolutely.
And so it's really important that we resist the temptation to attach labels unless it is absolutely necessary. And labels are far too freely assigned
Yeah.
at the moment, medicalizing what is just normal human reaction to trauma, in fact. So I think, I love the fact that you did deal with the labels. It's good to explain them because they have acquired meanings that were not originally there.
Yeah.
But it's so important. So give us a little bit more of the link then between the planetary energy. So you've been talking about the different defenses and how they link to the planetary energy. Bring us now back to the chakras. How does that all link to the chakras?
I think that's a sort of a slightly controversial because I think it's one of those things where every astrologer has their own feeling about the chakras, and if they have a sense of the energy field. So I try to keep it a bit general, but for me, Uranus, let's not bother to be on the planet. Let's go out into the cosmos. Let's shoot out through the seventh chakra and connect with the mind of God. And then Neptune, I can see into other worlds. There are no boundaries. The veil dissolves. So sixth chakra, and for me, Pluto is right down in the belly. In martial arts, I don't know if it's Japanese or Chinese, there's an energy center. It's not the second chakra. It's deeper than that. It's right in the sort of area of the pelvic cradle. And that's called the Tantien. And this is the source of your power. So it's got a lot of Mars qualities, but I also associate it with Pluto. It's that when you're really in touch with your Tantien, you're pretty unstoppable. And in my studies of, Barbara's model of the human energy field, you've got your vertical power current where all the chakras, emerge from. Vertical power current that connects right down to the earth and right up to the heavens. And I associate that with Saturn. She talks about the level of the horror. There's this, again, going with the Tantien and the idea of martial arts, that there's a deeper level of the human energy field, deeper than the chakras. Chakras very influenced by daily events and relationships, but the horror and the Tantien, they root you right down into the earth. And for me, that's Saturn. That's because we suffer so much with Saturn. But actually, when you can get the hang of Saturn, get the hang of Pluto, that's when you have your power. And that's when you can manifest your intention. And I would also, the the higher levels of the horror level, Jupiter, vision, inspiration. And Barbara Brennan talks about the soul seed, that's Venus. Anyway, and I think the sun, right, so Barbara Brennan talks about the core star, she's not the only person who says that there's a point at which we emerge from universal consciousness and we take on this beautiful light of uniqueness. And that is the source of our whole being, our energy field, the body. And the sun is not the same as the core star. I think the sun is not the same as the self in Jungian terms, but it's very close. It isn't the self because it's a part. All the planets make up the self, and all the planets reflect the light of the core star. But the sun is very close to it, and the moon. Obviously, traditionally we associate the moon with nourishment, with breasts and with stomach and digestion, all that stuff in the middle of the body. And I think that's right, because sadly, it's the lower chakras where we struggle. That's not without exception. There are people who have difficulties with the higher chakras, and certainly we have problems with the heart. But I think it's when you get down third, second, and first is where a lot of the defenses and a lot of the trauma is lodged. And not in any way to diminish the importance of the moon, but I think the moon as a receptacle for the unconscious and as the container of the body, that's where you're going to find a lot of this stuff. So maybe a lot of those lower chakras, you're going to find the moon energy there.
That's a very interesting connection between planetary energy and chakras. I think it's because the root chakra is also linked with mother and the maternal side.
Yeah.
And so I would also, and I'm very interested in Saturn and Pluto being there in your mind. I would agree with you on that, but I think the moon also has something
I agree
to do with that. And I think the solar plexus and the moon makes absolute sense too, because feelings, we feel them we feel it in our gut, we in our stomach, that we feel so much there. So I think, that makes complete sense to me. Venus is an interesting one, it's because you think of Venus as being the heart and love, but on the other hand, there's the sacral, which is about the sensual side of life. So I think that's a very interesting reflection.
Yes. And, when you were talking about labels, in a way, so we want things to be consistent and to make sense in astrology, and yet, sometimes it is very fluid. And maybe with one person, the moon would be very, very much about the base chakra and the family and the ancestral line and what it's like to be in a body. And for another person, it might be much more, heart and romance and relationship. And similarly with Venus, definitely sacral chakra and, that Taurus sort of sensual pleasure, but also that, the Venus in Libra and the sort of judgmental, more mental, but Venus is happiness, isn't it? She is happiness. And so I think what Barbara Brennan calls the high heart, soul seed, what am I longing for in this life? What makes me happy? And that's Venus. And what do I aspire to is a bit higher up, and that's Jupiter, Yeah.
It's such a brilliant connection to be making in order to reach healing. And I think, when you were describing the different stages and considering that this is, when we're toddlers, to me, it makes so much sense that the kinds of things that can really be misinterpreted or actually are very painful, that are experienced by the child would
Yeah.
have that time, because it's such a delicate, parenting is the hardest thing anybody can do,
Hmm.
because how do you guide an impulsive being
Yeah.
and teach them structure and self-discipline without damaging them? And that is the challenge that every parent faces, whilst at the same time being afflicted by their own stuff,
Yeah.
which they're going to transfer, project onto the child, or which they want to shield the child from, and by trying to shield them, create other issues. It is an absolute minefield. It is a wonder that most of us are somewhat sane.
It is. It is. Everything is, but I think that there's another piece to that, which is the ancestors. That because now we know that ancestral trauma comes down the DNA, and that's not a doom because you can change it. There's, as you say, the parents, all their stuff, which is like a cookie cutter imprint. Here you are. And again, there's a soul. For me, it's reincarnation. There's a soul that's been alive before, that has developed qualities and also developed challenges, or challenges that they, because that's the basis of astrology. You came to do this. You came to look at this, and if you got a ground cross, then then what's happening? What's that about? And I think these days there's such a sense of, not everywhere, but often in astrology, of people being the victim of their chart, that they are doomed. God, I remember when I was studying astrology, and I've got Venus in the 12th, and I picked up some book and I read Venus in the 12th, and it's like, okay, just take me now. I'm doomed. It's hopeless. There's nowhere to go. And that's so wrong. Any kind of, anything that is so limiting. There's a mighty soul that's coming, and this soul is not shown in the chart. Everything else is there. There's this beautiful spectrum of planetary energies that you've come to dance with, but your essence is not there. So even, that's why, I know Stephen Forrest says this, there's no such thing as a bad chart. If you got big challenges, get on with it, That's what you came to do. That sounds really mean, because, oh my God, life can be hard. Ooh, I just keep hearing people's just stories, and it's just like, whoa, that's really heartbreaking. Never to diminish that you get a big Pluto transit, a big Saturn transit, it can be awful. And the gift of astrology is, something's trying to happen here. There's an awakening that's trying to happen. And there is this great soul, and that is why, more and more as I was writing the book, I'm talking about I want to talk less about the wounding and the defense, and more about this great soul that's coming, imagining, this divine being coming down, and I'm going to get in, I'm going to be a 1 or 2 cell, I'm going to be a little fetus, and then I'm going to be in a body, and what is that like, and the difficulties of incarnating here, and the incredible wonder and joy of incarnating here. And the 5 stages, they're just, and if if you are Reichel or Alexander Lowen and Pyrarchus, you talk about the schizoid wound, like you're just stuck in this kind of mental haze. But if you look at it from my point of view, what incredible gifts. Jimi Hendrix, he's got a Uranus and Mercury everywhere in his chart. What a genius. He died young, 27 Club. But what did he bring with his access to the beyond, with his Uranian vision? And Jupiter as well, very strong, So there's always a gift. There's always something that's wanting to be born. It's not about the wounds. It's about how do we work with this?
And I think, a couple of interviews back, I was speaking to a hermeticist, Seven Bremner, and we got talking about the difference between destiny and fate. And I think it's so important that we understand that
Yes.
that fate is highly overrated from
Yes.
the point of view that if we are prepared to step beyond the labels or beyond the labels of the chart and accept that we are not, in fact, doomed, and every chart has these possibilities of the sound of doom.
Yes.
We can break free, and then we can meet destiny, which I think is much more about the fulfillment of the soul coming in through incarnation, and that is in fact the challenge of life. So we need to, and we all have our moments of fatalism. We all have our moments where we feel doomed, because life can stretch us to the limit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But we need to find help if we need it, so that we can break through. And the beauty of things is that we don't have to do this on our own.
Yeah, absolutely. You just said something that I think is so important. Pluto has just gone direct and is going to be, back in Aquarius, and then it's there for 20 years. We really are seeing this, emphasis on Aquarius and on the group and on finding each other and going. And also there's something about Aquarius and, something about vision, and going, finding, or really finding that part of ourselves that is bigger than all of it. And that it just sounds too mystical and airy-fairy for somebody who's going through a relationship breakup or worse or whatever. But there is this, great spirit in each of us. And something is trying to happen on the planet. And if you just watch the news, I can't watch it anymore, what's happening in the Middle East. It's too, it's just unbearable, actually. And, there don't seem to be any solutions. I don't get it with war. I don't get it. Thousands of years of human beings going to war. What is that? And it's so bad. And yet, so many of us who are on a spiritual path feel that something else is coming, that something else is being born, that all over the world people are meditating and reaching out to each other, and in these, sometimes in catastrophic situations, the people helping each other. We saw that in COVID, the help that was happening on the streets. And that's the highest expression of Aquarius, is we will come together and we will make something else. And it's a very visionary sign, evolutionary.
It's a very visionary sign. And as long as we hold on to the vision and resist the temptation to fall into ideology and dogma, we'll be fine.
Yeah. Yes. And I just would like to mention this because at the back of the book I've got 5 case studies. I look at Jimi Hendrix, Marilyn Monroe, Orson Welles, Frida Kahlo, and the 5th one is Teilhard de Chardin, which is not a name that everybody knows, but he was a great philosopher. He was a Jesuit priest, but he he was also a professor of two Earths, but certainly he was a great geologist. He was in China. He was part of the team that discovered the missing link. Don't know enough about archaeology, but this is Peking man, and so he contributed enormously to science. That he had this sense of evolution, that the whole of the human race was evolving, and he talks about the omega point, that we are, over whoever knows how much time we are evolving to become, to rediscover our divinity and to reunite with universal consciousness, with the divine. So this idea of the evolution of consciousness, and that's around today. That's a very Aquarian idea. Yeah, it's Prometheus. We can do better. We can go, we can make progress. And that's my world, really, is that whole thing of the evolution of consciousness, and a total belief in progress, and that we're not the victims of our charts, and we're not the victims of fate. And it sure is tough when you look out at the world and you see what's happening, but so many people are saying this is just an enormous transition that we're going through.
It feels like we are going through initiation rites into something, if we are to borrow that principle from mystical teachings and shamanic tradition. It certainly feels like that, and I am very grateful for the beautiful optimism which you have brought to the end of our conversation. So let us urge everybody to seek to be free from whatever is holding them back, so that their light can shine all the brighter. And to help people along the way, I can think of no better guide to help them than this marvelous book, Charting the Soul, the link to which will be in the description box. And I know, Rebekah, that you are also starting a course very shortly.
I am. I'm going to be teaching a course, a 3-module course called The Fundamentals of Archetypal Astrology. So for me, astrology, it starts with the planets, and it's like, really get to know the sun, really get to know Jupiter, and then once you really feel, oh, that's the sun, but that's Jupiter, then the signs, it's kind of obvious. Oh, that's Sagittarius, and that's Leo. It's easier. Oh, that's the 5th house. That's the 9th house. So starting with the archetypes, and an archetype is a big elemental principle, and these are the elements of astrology. You got to know if Mars is active in your chart. Well, who is this guy? Well, he's the god of war, but he's also the god of agriculture and growth and fertility. So starting with the archetypes, and then second module looking at aspects, because once you know about the sun, you say, well, that's great. And then, what's it like when the sun is conjunct Pluto? So it's the aspects, or is opposite Pluto, or square. And the third module is in the houses. So we've got to know the planets. We can see which ones are dancing together, which ones are pulling in different directions. And you go into the houses, and this is what it's happening in my life. This, here it is happening in the 10th house of career, or here it's all happening in the 6th house of health and the body, So going from the archetypes. And the first module, almost anybody could do it, because we're just learning about the archetypes. The second 2 are for astrologers.
Well, I will be sure to be putting a link into the description box. When does this begin, Rebekah?
So the course, the first module, starting on October the 27th. If anybody is interested, this Thursday, the 17th, I'm doing a free taster session. So I think, they can contact me and I'll send them a Zoom link to the session.
Good. The link to everything will be in the description box. But before we go, we need your website, don't we?
Have we not done that? Yes. Well, it's the website is very easy. It's Charting the Soul. www.chartingthesoul. What is it?
Is it .com or
.com.
good?
And .co.uk. I think both. www.hcpps, all that. Chartingthesoul.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Lovely to talk.
And thank you all for watching. For those of you who already have a good grounding on the planets and cannot wait for Rebekah's course on aspects to begin, that is precisely the subject of a course that I am starting later this month. So you can also contact me if you would like to do some work on aspects. Next time, we're going to be looking at decans and the Sabian symbols. Until then, goodbye.